I am Sophia, 36 years old. I work from home. I married Ethan when I was 33. I wanted a child, so we both considered fertility treatments and decided to get tested at a hospital. The results showed no issues, so I thought we could easily have a child. But time kept passing without any luck. Recently, as I was starting to give up hope, I mentioned to Ethan that maybe we couldn't have children. Unexpectedly, this was his response. We have to have a boy because that's what my mother wants. Honestly, I was frustrated by his comment. Ethan is, how should I put it, somewhat of a mama's boy. He's a wonderful husband, but he seems unable to go against his mother. I prefer to keep my distance from my mother-in-law. Frankly, I'd rather not be involved with her at all. Ethan has a sister, but the extreme adoration from the mother-in-law towards her eldest son made his sister so fed up that she moved out of the house early and never kept in touch. Ethan often relocates for work, but when we were newlyweds, he worked near his parents' home. I knew about his frequent transfers when we married, thinking as long as we were together, it didn't matter where we lived. That was so naive of me. Living close to his parents meant frequent visits from my mother-in-law, interfering in everything. Despite me working from home, she would disturb me, complain about how I did the housework. It was incredibly annoying. Moreover, every time she visited, she would repeatedly say things like, "Are you pregnant yet? Make sure it's a boy, not a girl," to the point where I felt like my ears were about to fall off. This situation has been nothing but stressful. I tried talking to Ethan about asking his mother not to come over so often, but he's always overly optimistic, saying things like, "Mom is just happy we're living near her. She probably just wants to get along." However, I can't help but think that the mother-in-law intentionally wants to stress me out. I've always been a cautious person, while Ethan is more carefree. These contrasting traits were what attracted us to each other, thinking that we filled each other's missing qualities. We believed we were a perfect match. However, it's hard for him to understand situations like this. However, about 6 months ago, Ethan had a sudden transfer, and we ended up moving away from his parents' house. Now we live closer to my parents. My parents' house is surrounded by fields, but our new place is less than an hour away by car. It's convenient for commuting and shopping. Moving away from Ethan's family home, the majority of my stress disappeared. I was able to focus on my work and enjoyed each day. And just recently, we found out that I was pregnant. The joy was overwhelming, and we hugged each other in happiness. There are naturally concerns due to our age, but it's a long-awaited pregnancy. When I called my mother-in-law to share the news, this was her response. "It's a boy, of course, right?" Even though we didn't know the baby's gender yet, Ethan told me, "See, Mom is saying it has to be a boy." A few months later, we found out it's a girl. Upon finding out, the mother-in-law purposely called when Ethan wasn't around and told me, "If you can't give birth to a boy, what's the point of you marrying into our family? So useless." Being pregnant and already emotional, her words deeply hurt me, and I cried alone. When Ethan came home and I explained what happened, he yelled, "Don't speak ill of my mother," which only made me cry even more. However, when my husband is not around his mother, he is very attentive to my health and helps around the house. I believe he's a wonderful husband without her interference. Thanks to him, I was able to give birth to a healthy baby. After giving birth in my hometown, I returned to our home about a month later. Ethan came to my parents' house to pick us up, and we were able to return home with our newborn child as a family of 3. But when we got home, mother-in-law was waiting for us. I hadn't expected her to be there, and my joy quickly faded. Yet, Ethan said, "Sophia, you must be tired," so I asked Mom to help with the chores. Then, while Ethan was putting our daughter to bed, mother-in-law took a cake box out of the fridge. "This is a gift for you. I bet you didn't have anything delicious in the countryside." I was annoyed by her comment, but pretended not to be. "This cake cost $500. You've never seen such a cake, have you?" Then, she handed the cake box to me. "What? A $500 cake?" I was shocked. having never heard of such an expensive cake. "Yes, come on, open it," she said, urging me to open it quickly. I was excited, wondering what a $500 cake might look like, and opened the box on the table. However, mother-in-law had a smirk on her face. Inside the box was a cake that hardly seemed worth $500. The whipped cream had lost its sheen, and on top of it were canned oranges. Is this really a $500 cake? Why? What kind of cake shop sells something like this? I have a sweet tooth and tend to find any cake delicious. But this was the first time I was so disappointed by one. Moreover, what I saw was even more unbelievable than the cake. I looked up to see mother-in-law wearing a self-satisfied grin as always. What do you think? Do you like it? Overwhelmed by anger, I impulsively threw the cake, box and all, into the trash bin. "I want you to leave." Sensing something unusual from my raised voice, Ethan entered the living room. Before I could explain to Ethan, mother-in-law shouted, "Well, Ethan, listen." Sophia threw the celebration cake in the trash. Ethan, looking where mother-in-law was pointing, exploded in anger. "Sophia, how could you do that? After all the effort my mother put into making it for our celebration." As I was at a loss for words, wondering if this was some kind of joke, mother-in-law showered on, "I went out of my way to make this for you. It cost $500. You should be grateful." I see. There's no way mother-in-law would bring a cake worth $500. Especially not one that's shabby. And that plate, I wouldn't accept it even if it was $5. So that's what it was. Now it all makes sense. No cake shop would sell such a cake. And only mother-in-law could come up with such a plate. As these thoughts raced through my mind, Ethan spoke up. How could you do such a terrible thing? Apologize right now." I realized that Ethan, my husband, believed his mother over me. Shocked and unable to respond, I heard our daughter crying and hurriedly went to her. As I comforted her, I heard voices from the living room, but my daughter came first. I ignored it. After a while, when my daughter fell asleep, I returned to the living room. I found a note from Ethan saying, "We're eating out. Don't make dinner. Apologize when I get back." Stunned by the treatment, I wondered how I could continue living with him. Going back to my parents' home was also a difficult choice. As I pondered, I remembered the discarded cake and peeked into the trash bin. The cake mother-in-law brought was still there. Thinking this could be potential evidence, I took out my phone and snapped a picture of the discarded cake. I then called my parents' home and briefly explained what happened. My father offered to come pick me up. It felt bad to take my newborn daughter on a car ride, but there was no time to hesitate. While Ethan was out for dinner, my father arrived and started loading our bags into his car. Around that time, Ethan and mother-in-law returned. They looked surprised seeing my father, but even more so seeing our bags being loaded. Ethan immediately turned sour and started berating me. They looked surprised seeing my father, but even more so seeing our bags being loaded. Ethan immediately turned sour and started berating me. "What are you doing? Who gave you permission to pack? You always think of running back to your parents whenever something doesn't go your way." I noticed Ethan's face was red and I could smell alcohol. This fueled his anger and his tone became even harsher. How could he drink in such a situation? His insensitivity pushed me past my breaking point. "You have a newly born baby at home. What kind of nerve do you have to drink at a time like this? Enjoy your time with your mom. I'm going back to my parents' house." "Look at your face. Scary like a demon. Go wherever you want. I'll feel relieved," she said with a sneer, her breath reeking of alcohol. "Sure, I'll leave with our daughter. Hope you live happily with Ethan." Ignoring the discontented look of Ethan, I quickly boarded my father's car with my daughter. I was grateful that my father chose not to say anything. The next day, Ethan called. "Sophia, where are you? You weren't in bed and I got worried." I suddenly remembered that Ethan can't handle alcohol and forgets everything after drinking, which disappointed me. "Unbelievable. You left your starving daughter and me yesterday to dine out with mother-in-law, whom you prioritize more than us. And you drank so much you can't even remember. I'm never going back to that house again." Upon hearing this, Ethan seemed utterly shocked. At that moment, I could hear mother-in-law's voice in the background over the phone, which made my anger surge. "I have no idea what you're talking about. You might care about mother-in-law, but remember I'm your wife. You completely neglected me, exhausted from childbirth, without any concern. To me, mother-in-law is a stranger, and I don't want to have to accommodate her all the time. Even when we lived in our previous house, I couldn't have a child because of the stress from her frequent visits. Even when we lived in our previous house, I couldn't have a child because of the stress from her frequent visits. You want proof? We moved and I got pregnant immediately. I don't even want to see her face anymore. There's a limit to insensitivity. Once I started, I couldn't stop. I knew it wasn't right, but I decided to say everything I felt. I never thought you were this kind of woman. How could you do this to my mother? Come here right now and apologize to her on your knees." I was taken aback by his words. Frustrated with Ethan's foolishness, I retorted, "Who do you think you are to say something like that?" Following that, I continued in a cold voice, "Your mother said she would feel relieved without me and our daughter around. Looks like she got her wish, didn't she? And I have no idea what you're talking about. Your mother has been telling me for a long time not to have a daughter but to give birth to a son." I thought she was joking, but seeing that cake yesterday, I realized she was serious. "The cake my mother brought, yes, didn't you see it?" "I didn't, but didn't you notice how shoddy that cake was? And the message on the plate, so insulting." Ethan seemed troubled. I remembered I had taken a photo of the cake yesterday. There was no other trash in the bin, so I figured it was still there. I told Ethan to check the trash bin in the kitchen. "It's empty." Thinking that mother-in-law might have hidden it, I said, "I'm sure it's her doing. She's there with you, right? Ask her about the message on the cake plate." I could hear Ethan and his mother's voices over the phone. Mother-in-law is desperately pretending she doesn't know anything, trying to make herself out to be the victim. I wonder which one of us my husband will believe. "And Mom says she doesn't remember anything," he said, sounding a bit confused. Of course, seeing something like that would be too much. She must have disposed of it so it wouldn't be found. Ethan looked even more bewildered. Then I heard mother-in-law's voice over the phone. "You stupid Sophia. What are you lazing around for? Hurry up and come make breakfast." My husband, flustered by this remark, tried to intervene. "I'll let you decide who to believe after you see the photo of the cake. I'm sending it to you by email now. Show it to your mother and see what she says." I hung up the phone and sent Ethan all the photos I had taken the previous day. After a short while, he called back, suggesting he come over. "There's no need. Your father will probably show up soon," I said tersely and hung up. While I hadn't said anything at that moment yesterday, I had contacted my father-in-law about the entire situation. To his surprise, he was shocked by his wife and son's actions, and he apologized. That evening, Ethan arrived with his parents. As soon as he saw me, he looked like he was about to cry and started to apologize. "I'm so sorry I didn't notice all the things Mom was doing. Not just yesterday, but she's been tormenting you for so long." Ethan seemed to regret believing mother-in-law's lies. But I felt I couldn't go on with him anymore. "I've told you so many times. But you never took me seriously. You'd say things like, 'Mom's happy.' I can't forgive you anymore, even if you say you didn't know." My words seemed to hit him hard, and Ethan turned pale. "Even about our child. As if having a girl is not good enough. Why does she think she has anything to say about this? And yesterday, you left our newborn daughter and me to go drink with her. Maybe it's better if my daughter and I aren't around." Ethan seemed to be reflecting on everything and suddenly clung to me. "I didn't neglect you or our child. It's not like that. Please believe me. I can't believe you anymore." Hearing this, Ethan fell silent. "Even now, you still prioritize his mother. Just a mama's boy doing whatever his mother says. Did you know that your sister left because of the same reason? If only I had realized this before we got married, I wouldn't have had to experience such awful feelings." If only I had realized this before we got married, I wouldn't have had to experience such awful feelings. As I spoke with a sigh, Ethan waved his hands, as if to say that was not the case, and pleaded, "And I do consider Sophia and the baby important as well. It's true, I care about Mom, but I'm not a mama's boy. Ethan, can you stand staying away from your mother?" Then Ethan fell silent again. I felt pathetic and sighed deeply. My mother-in-law, who was brought reluctantly, shouted, "There's no way I can leave Ethan. I am his mother. I have been with him much longer than you." And then, as the father-in-law tried to intervene, she continued to shout, becoming more and more upset. I was opposed to this marriage in the first place. Spent money and time on infertility treatments. If he had married someone younger, this wouldn't have happened. "I will divorce as you wish. We are strangers after all, and I never want to see your face again." Saying so, Ethan looked at me as if clinging to hope. Unbelievable to think that such a person is my mother-in-law, claiming it's a $500 cake and bringing such a shoddy one, and then writing such words on the plate. I then showed everyone the photo I took with my smartphone yesterday. The cake plate read, "Take your daughter and leave." Seeing this, the father-in-law was immediately shocked and started yelling at his wife. "What kind of mother are you? You did this to our own daughter and now to Sophia." I couldn't believe my ears. It seems she has done this before. On her own daughter's birthday cake plate, when she was young, she wrote, "I didn't want a daughter." It makes sense why her daughter doesn't come near a parental home. Doing such a thing even to her own daughter. Only the son is precious to her. Probably can't stand her son paying attention to other women. It's unbelievable to alienate even her own daughter just because she wants special treatment from her son. So, as per the mother-in-law's wishes, Ethan is doing whatever she says. When I pressured my husband for a divorce, he started making all sorts of excuses. I admit, what my mom did was bad. Mom just went a bit too far. She doesn't want us to divorce. What do you mean? I can't believe what you're saying. I can never forgive this. So, me and our daughter are not important to you. You didn't even say a single word about wanting us to come back. Then, father-in-law, who had been observing the situation, spoke up quietly. "How pitiful. Is this what family has come to? Now, the only thing you can do is sign the divorce papers. I've also decided to get a divorce." "What did you just say?" Mother-in-law, surprised by the unexpected turn of events, turned around in shock. "Ever since the issue with our daughter, I've been holding back. But after seeing what you did to Sophia, I've reached my limit. Leave my house as soon as possible." Ethan seemed unable to accept the situation, but eventually, he agreed to the divorce. Initially, I didn't plan on accepting any compensation. But father-in-law said, "I'll deduct it from my wife's share of the assets." So I decided to accept it without hesitation. In the end, just as father-in-law had said, the divorce became a reality. It seemed Ethan believed the cause of the divorce was his mother. He didn't take care of her, and the family fell apart. Mother-in-law, struggling to live by, rashly invested in cryptocurrency without working and lost all her assets due to bad decisions. Ethan, as promised, has been paying child support regularly. While my parents watch over my daughter, I continue to work. Now, seeing my daughter grow up healthily by my side brings me true happiness.